Hey everyone, I'm Jackie Weeb. I want to talk to you a little bit about one of the faces of fear. If you have followed along with me for any length of time, you've probably heard me talk about, what God's original intent for birth was that there would be no fear involved. But this doesn't apply just to birth. It's really God's original intent for any area of life. But last week, I started to see some things, we're always learning something new, right? Or seeing things in new light. And I started to see some of this in a bit of a different light. But really it was that when it's all about rules, there's always fear involved. See, we have to recognize these things and we have to learn what the faces of fear look like. So the reason that is true is because whenever there is a rule, wherever there is a rule, there's also always like a consequence or a punishment if that rule gets broken. And according to 1 John 4:18, I like the way the Passion Translation says it. It says, fear is always related to punishment. So therefore, if you don't have rules, there's nothing to punish because there's no rule that can be broken and therefore no punishment for it, right? But, to me, it's interesting. So, for example, 1 Corinthians 8, and there's probably some other chapters in there as well. But they wrote to Paul. And to me, what I hear in that is like they wanted hard and fast rules that were the same for everybody, right? And it's very interesting the way Paul responds. He responds by talking about walking in love. He responds by talking about conscience and not causing your brother or sister to stumble. He did not respond by saying everybody should eat meat sacrificed to idols. And he didn't respond by saying nobody should eat meat sacrificed to idols. And so, like, the thing about original intent is that you cannot remove the personal leading of the Holy Spirit if you want to walk in God's original intent for your life or for your birth, whatever, specific situation it is. And the thing about it is, when you're hearing from the Lord personally and you get a word from him and you have his word to stand on and he's speaking to you and you know it, that's when fear will go, because we know that faith works by love. Everything he's saying to you is out of a spirit of love. He is the spirit of love. And we also know that faith comes by hearing. So you can't be in faith about something you haven't heard, right? But the thing about it is we cannot be married to rules instead of looking for unforced rhythms of grace. In the birth world, I think about kind of the whole entire conventional maternal care system, the medical system. And I'm not knocking everybody. I certainly never, throw everybody in the same pot. But one of the things that I don't like about it, and one of the things that I believe is important in birth work, is that people have to be treated as individuals. And that the system is kind of based on rules, honestly. Like they'll call it policies maybe. But it's an effort, like everybody needs to be put into the same box. And there's not really room for individuality. There's not really an acknowledgement of you are a unique human being and your story, your body, your birth, your baby, like is not the same as anybody else's. But there's not much allowance for that kind of thing. And it is a system that is very much based on rules, because when you try to go against their rules or their policies and the way they do things, it's followed up very often with fear-based either threats or, fear-based incentives, like the response is based in fear, or it's based in trying to cause fear if you don't go along with what they say, if you don't, submit to their rules, And what this comes down to is really a spirit of control. And that is one of the biggest faces of fear, is a spirit of control. And we were not ever created to be dominated by it. Like when God gave us dominion in Genesis at the beginning, which would reveal original intent, right? He gave us dominion over his creation. He never gave us dominion over each other. We were not created for that. And that's why when someone attempts to do that, that's why it can hurt us so much. That's why it can be so damaging, and it can be traumatic even in some cases, because that's not what we were created for. We were created for fellowship with him. We were created to pursue relationship and be led by him. And, I think a lot of people are afraid of that. In the religious world, they're afraid of it because religion is afraid that, if we don't have rules and then we have no control. If we have no control, then everybody's just going to do whatever they want, and it's going to be chaos and craziness, right? And so, like, it's not like I am against order or anything like that. Like, honestly, by nature, I'm a little bit more of a rule keeper, and I married the opposite, by the way. But so for me, it's really, in some ways, and I'm sure some of you relate, but it takes another level, so to speak, to really be like, okay, you know what? Following a rule in this situation isn't the best. It's not the best. But allowing room to be led. If we don't allow room to be led, we can't walk in the original intent that God has for us. And Matthew 11:30 said that Jesus's way is easy and light. And if you have ever tried to live by rules, then that that's not the light and easy way. It's hard. It's hard to follow to live by rules, because there's always fear of punishment. There's always fear of, like, what if I don't do everything right? What if I'm not perfect enough? And condemnation and all those things. And so we know that's not the light and easy way. But, there is an answer, to if people are afraid that, well, if we don't have rules, then everything will be chaos and people will just do whatever they want. There's an answer to that. And it's in Galatians 5. Verse 16, primarily, it says, walk by the Spirit and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. So the answer is right there. And then verse 18 says, if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. So what if we would put the emphasis on being led by the Spirit? And what does that take? That takes building a relationship with the Lord personally for yourself. That takes hearing from him. That takes intentional time, just like any other relationship that you have in your life, but really being intentional about it and building that relationship and having that fellowship. God is always with you and he doesn't leave you or forsake you, but like, just, Peter and I mean, we're with each other. We're not leaving each other, right? But that doesn't mean that we are always in the level and amount of fellowship that could be good for us, or that would make the relationship stronger and help us understand each other better, or, just be on the same page. And that's how it is with the Lord. Like he's for you. He's not leaving you. He's not forsaking you, but there's always a level of fellowship that you can pursue, that closeness with him. And when you're doing that, that's when that personal leading and that personal hearing his voice, it becomes so rich. And that's where faith really comes, because faith comes by hearing, and you can be confident in knowing that if you follow his voice, it's going to work out well for you. And so I just want to encourage you, like, don't be married to the rules. Don't be married to the policies. And if somebody wants to force you into that, we have to make a choice. And we want to be led, and we want to walk in the unforced rhythms of grace, as the Passion Translation says. So I want to encourage you with that today. and just recognize when there's a spirit of control at play. And that is not a spirit that we yield to. We yield to the spirit of love, of power, and a sound mind. And anyone who is operating in that spirit, that's somebody that we can trust, even if it's not somebody, like you're never going to see eye to eye and agree on every single issue with anybody. And so that's not what it's about, but it's people who are operating and walking in a spirit of love instead of a spirit of control, because fear and love are opposites. And so a spirit of control is opposite of a spirit of love.